Professional development is so key to our growth as leaders. If you don't have that, I'd question the leadership word. This could be courses, it could be experiential. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. Or it could even just be like tips and tricks to improve our workflow and processes. It's all learning. But in that learning, do we ever really learn how to learn? How to consume that information? Where to start down any particular path? This week, I have a great conversation with Dr. Deena Kara Shaffer, who has made this her life's work. We chat about how to shift our mindsets and truly figure out how to learn to learn. And that how word is going to be super key, because figuring out the how is a big part of the solution. Hold on. Welcome back to Relationships at Work, the leadership mindset guide to creating a workplace we love. I'm your host, Russel, a communications and leadership nerd with decades of experience in both of those areas and a whole heap of curiosity on how we can make the workplace a better place. Now, if you're a leader trying to understand and improve your impact on work culture and the employee experience, well, you found yourself in the right place. The place I want to start today is with a question. Curiosity is always super important. You'll hear that a lot on this show. How do you learn? Take a minute, think about that for just a moment. What works for you? Do you know what to learn? Are you having conversations about it with your colleagues, your teams, your bosses? Do you know where to start when it comes to your learning? Do we know how to learn to even start this all off? I find this topic vastly fascinating. There are so many studies illustrating how leaders are not supported in their learning until far too late in their leadership journey. So it's important for us to figure this out as early as possible. So what is our role? What is our organization's role in learning strategies? I have so many questions, which is good because curiosity, like I said, is a key to all of this. I've gone down the university path myself, the post-secondary formula, as it will, had a certification in broadcast communications, and I got my degree in communications, professional communications. But that's not really built for personalization. There's really not a lot of space for us to go, oh, this is how I prefer to learn. It's generally a factory and very one-sided as the organization provides you the information, you jump through the hoops, you check your boxes, you study, you write, you produce. I didn't understand my learning style or my preferences till much later in my journey. And most of us certainly don't know it if we're going from high school, then to some post-secondary, then to the workplace. There's no time, there's no space. We don't learn to learn because we're too busy going through the machine and the overwhelm. Dr. Deena Kara Shaffer, as I said at the top, this is her life. This is what she focuses on, about how we can better learn to learn. This ability to understand the how and make it part of our work. She's even recently written a book about it called Feel Good Learning. And we had a really insightful, really thoughtful conversation on some of the things we all can do to get better at it. After all, it'll only help us and our teams if we do. Over to Dr. Shaffer. And on the show today, we have Dr. Deena Kara Shaffer, and here is why she is awesome. She's an author, educator, learning coach, resiliency consultant, wellness writer, and speaker, and I did that all in one breath. She's behind Awakened Learning, which is a consultancy teaching us how to learn. She's a president of Learning Specialists Association of Canada, and she's the author of a new book, Feel Good Learning, all in caps, on how to prioritize, focus, study, and learn everything better. And she's here. Hello, Deena.
Oh, hi. It's so good to be here. I'm going to have to, though, really shore up the energy that is different between where your time zone is and mine to really match the beautiful flurry. But hi.
If it makes you feel better, I peak early and then I just glide for the rest of the way.
Great. I'm slow burn,
Yes.
so I'll just ramp up.
We'll meet in the middle somewhere around the 20-minute mark. Perfect.
Well, that'll be a really fantastic minute alchemy there.
Yeah, wait for it. Everybody listening, wait for it. See if you
Wait.
notice. See if you notice. So I don't know if this is a good segue or a bad segue for you to relive an experience or a memory, but I have to start off with the first question I ask all of my guests, which is, what's your best or worst employee experience?
Yeah, that's my favorite, especially because what all the listeners don't know is that we've been for the past 2.5 hours working through the tech.
This is a
So
fair
it
point.
felt
We are masking so hard right now.
there's a lot of fury, there's a lot of sorrow, but we've made it to the other side.
It's been very
So to,
traumatic.
to continue to talk about distress and despair, yeah, a prior work, a prior moment with a boss type human. And it was so beautiful in connecting with you because you're like, don't say one of each. You got to choose. So I have one,
Okay.
but I'm going to leave it to you and your audience as to whether or not it's the best or worst. I don't mean to be cryptic, but
Sure.
here we go. Okay.
Mysterious. Go.
Right? So I was in a meeting with a remarkable dean, a lot of positional power, a lot of gorgeous fanciness of thought, leadership. And she had kind of tapped me to talk about student retention. My whole life is about making learning better, especially around where learning. There's some suffering in it. And so she wants to talk with me and hear my ideas about retention. How do people stay when staying is hard? How do we get learners to stay post-secondary campus? Oh boy, Russell. I do what Deena does, which is that I kind of go for it. I research, I pull my peers across Canada. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing over there? What's going on over there? What's working? Deep dive into the literature. I set up an agenda, ranked orders, some potential questions on each of those items. I am ready, Russell. I am ready for my Monday 9 a.m. I email it to her on a Friday in preparation. I think I'm like patting myself on the back. I've done a good job. I've supported her well. I've tended to her question. We said no response on Friday. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Maybe she's not in the office. Monday morning rolls around. No prior reply. All right. It's 9 a.m. I show up. Immediately, Deena, don't ever do that again. I was taken aback. I have tears in my eyes a little bit. It's like a spirit. Ouch, a sting. She goes, you didn't have to do any of it. I just wanted to shoot the shit with you and hear some of your ideas. And in that moment, I understood how in any current boss type encounter, we carry the history of all of our boss type encounters. And I missed the mark so profoundly about what this leader was asking because of the hurts of prior leaders and how they had expected me to show up in spaces. They needed to have me come with a full agenda, with a kind of stratified order of what is most important, what's next, what's okay if we don't talk about. I had to actually come with some of my own predictive answers or responses. I couldn't just come with an open and spacious question at times. I brought all of that into the present moment, and I didn't have to. And that wave of spirit, ouch, really softened into relief of what it is to be asked to just show up with no extra or hours and hours and hours and hours for research, but that my presence was enough for an informal meeting.
What was your relationship with that boss from that moment forward?
So much stronger,
Mm.
so much more trust, so much more of me and of her and every subsequent encounter because we caught each other in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
She had to feel safe enough to say, not okay, not necessary, don't do that. Overwhelming, actually. I had to be able to hear it, locate the part of me that was doing that, and be willing to do it differently. And actually, we've just written an article, a chapter for an upcoming anthology, and we're thinking about it as like expansive versus spacious leadership to be able to do that dance that is full of messiness and mistakes.
Strength of self awareness and situational awareness and how that sort of came together in that moment for both of you was huge. But you have to have
Was
that. You have to be able to have that muscle.
for sure. And the lucky part for me that allows me to take that interplay forward into future meetings and future boss type moments is it's not that she and I had an underlying friendship. We didn't have a long history. It wasn't that, "Oh, Deena, come on, you don't have to do that." Oh no, she got serious. She got real serious. And then I got real stunned serious. And then we could pause, feel into, and kind of co work out together what had happened. And now we can really shoot the shit about retention.
Right. So I'm going to use a beautiful segue here and go, well, you learned a lot in that moment. And we're going to talk about learning today, Deena. That's
Nice.
good, eh? That's good.
Nice.
So, learning. It's not an obvious thing for a lot of people. It is not intentional. It is just something they suddenly have to do as a check box when they're in the workplace, we're in the work environment. And a lot of the work you do and a lot of the intention you have is helping leaders have a plan to learn, to learn to learn. Why do they need to?
Yeah, I love this question. I think because of how much is inherited and gets kind of sort of spills back over without any intention. We're just doing the same things, saying the same things, repeating things that we've absorbed in our earlier career journeys. So, part of helping leaders understand the learning element is really about bringing more awakeness. It's about bringing more awareness as to the how of what they're doing. So if they are bringing folks together in a meeting, are they thinking about the pedagogy, art of teaching, the art of learning, what's happening in that moment between leading a meeting and having other people hear and respond? Are they thinking about actually including and helping all folks find access and waypoints into that? We often think about learning as happening in formal institutions in our early years of getting to wherever we got to. We think about it in terms of upskilling or next leveling or, career step up. We think about it in terms of professional development. If we have to actually take certifications or, all right, we're heading to that conference again and really hoping that one of those, 15 sessions is a little bit of an uplift or offers some takeaways that I can actually take away.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. That learning happens in all of those places. But learning happens in the connective tissue of the everyday and workplaces. And I'm so interested in that. I'm interested in what we might bring, like radical, disruptive, and all the way awake energy to that otherwise just gets recreated over and over.
So, what damage are we doing following the protocols, the processes, oh, I don't need to learn a thing till somebody tells me I have to learn a thing? Or, what damage is the current learning model doing?
Yeah, I wonder if there even is a current learning model. I think there's an assumption we learn through osmosis, that we pick up a workplace culture and that we just carry that on. So the harm, I think, is in pretty profound exclusion, despite the language of inclusion. I think it's a values misalignment. I think if we're talking about access, are we actually making sure that we're not speaking in acronyms, that we're giving many different ways to participate? Are we explaining in multiple metaphors what we're actually after? Are we explaining and offering insight into the how of what we're asking our teams and employees to do? It's one thing to just say, do this, or expect, not even say it or ask, expect that something is done. Does anyone know how? Has anyone been shown how? Given feedback as to how? I think that's a critical piece to productivity, non-toxic productivity, to team harmony and cohesion and psychological safety. Anything good happening at work? How's that how going?
So, what is a learning strategy? One with intention, one that's planned. I'm a big fan of definitions. As much as I love words being used over and over again, please note sarcasm, I need to understand what they actually mean. And so, leadership, sure, but from a learning strategy standpoint, how would you define that intention?
Yeah, this is my whole life, Russell, for sure. So some people who are fancier than I might call it metacognition. So learning about learning. Some people get real jazzed about the learning science and cognitive psych. For sure, I'm into it. Cool, do that if that's your jam. I don't know. I think about learning strategies, which arguably are potentially the two most boring words together, although are any moment are going to have their day and people will understand that it's actually transformative work despite the big yarn about the phrase learning strategies. It's the how. It's revealing the hidden assumptions underneath an instruction, underneath an ask, and underneath a task. So it means things like, how do you prioritize? If you have 15 things that are coming at you, how do you actually know which to do first? There are many different ways to think about that. Why don't we talk about that? Why don't we reveal it? It's actually not very obvious. Or if we talk about procrastination, we have a massive to-do list or even a short one. Where did those to-dos come from? It's a brain dump. It's kind of arbitrary. It's like how we remembered it and then somebody interrupted and then, oh man, I got an email. Okay, I better write that down. It's coming from all kinds of sources. Well, how am I going to tackle it? Well, I'm going to do the thing that's easiest to cross off because I like things getting crossed off. But that's arbitrary and leaves all the hardest, most complex, layered tasks left. And there'll be items side by side on a to-do list that carry much different weight. This might seem so boring, but it is the architecture of each of our days, whether talk about it and air it out or not. So it's the how we go about whatever it is we're going about doing underneath every field of work.
So, I'm listening to this and I'm hearing an individual that's having to craft a learning strategy. Is it up to the individual, or what is the organization's role in making sure this is part of their culture?
Yeah. This is, I think, one of the favorite things that you could ask me because there's so much pressure on a person to do all the things, to rally and shore up in the face of hurdles and setbacks and roadblocks, to keep learning, to keep honing and revising. That is a lot and that is exhausting. And actually, the flip of it is a system, process, operations that nourish on scale, right? Like more than just one person trying their whole heart and guts out. So if we think operationally or organizationally, how to enact this? Well, if we're willing to all buy into things standard now, like learning outcomes, like equity statements, like mission, vision, values. I mean, there are articulations that we all do and try to live up to. Then why not reveal the how? Why not make transparent the various different ways to go about doing it? There is no singular way to write a particular brief, to research, to go about discerning what's important, to prepare a presentation? Why not actually have opportunities for folks to share what it is that they do, to co-create, co-curate, to understand, oh, that's how you organize your day? Whoa, dude, that's brilliant. And then also offer a variety of different kind of accesses to apps, hacks, interventions, micro approaches that might help people out a whole lot at getting through whatever is on their plate in the workplace.
So I'm trying to think of it from an organization, because you bring up vision, mission, values, but that is very much driven by an organization. Individuals may not be, do they need to consider those things when they're planning their own learning strategy? Is it personalized to them? Is it have to be in line with the organization they work for based on those vision, missions, values, and so forth? Or is there some happy medium? I always find it interesting when we talk about personalization, but an organization is so generic. It is so driven to the dollar or driven to a purpose that is not a straight, easy line necessarily from an individual to an organization. So when we're thinking about learning, what do we have to keep in mind when we're making those strategies?
Yeah, I love that. Here is where actually the individual can do whatever and you told me I could swear, fuck they want.
Fuck yes.
Because, yeah. So if I'm in a meeting and I have to pay fullest attention so that I walk out of that meeting understanding what my role is, what my next steps are, there is no singular way to take notes. That's up to me. But the way it gets to be up to me is if we talk about it. How do you take notes? How do you pay attention when meetings are boring? How do you figure out next steps? That's the kind of conversation that I really want leaders to begin to encourage with their staff and team. There are so many good initiatives, but the one thing for me that's missing is this tacit, assumed, oh, people just know how to do the thing I'm asking them to do. And it could come in the form of, all right, everybody, we're going to read Adam Grant's work right now. All right, we're going to talk about atomic habits, everyone. How we're going to automate some shit. It can be in the form of book sharing. It can be in the form of beautiful podcast sharing. Look, I'm amplifying you right now, buddy. My new pal. We've met it through like a whole tech trauma together. Look at that. Stop
We've come so
shouting
far.
out on your own thing. It's about resource sharing, external resources, and also internal ones. It's about going, hey, I use Todoist. Anybody else? Oh, yeah, I use Microsoft OneNote to keep myself organized. I use a handy dandy analog agenda. I tape record as I go home and then I transcribe it. How do people do the volumes of work they have to do? It is a taken for granted aspect of the work world that I want to blow wide open. What's your process? How many times do we have to talk about something like toxic productivity or I'm overwhelmed? I'm teetering on the edge. I cannot cope with all there is to do. I am so delighted and relieved that there are brilliant and skillful mental health professionals. I also want highly skilled learning professionals to be included in the mix, to be like, there are such a range of approaches and interventions that will change how you move through the stuff of your day.
I love that you're not making it about being an island, because you have to engage with others. You have to be curious in order to understand what learning is needed or how you can better learn. Or I hate the idea that it's just on someone, sometimes even that it's just on the organization. But I love the idea of that interconnectedness, that network where if you want to learn, you can bring others with you. It can be a collaborative effort instead of just something that you have to figure it out yourself.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's not about me signing up for whatever on the learning calendar this month is how to use Excel a little better, the procurement process. Those are good and those are important. And holy crap, they're on they're on my calendar for next month too. But I don't think it has to be alone. I don't think it has to be a pre-recorded video. I think it can be conversations about what's hard, what are the sticky points, what are the bottlenecks, and what are people doing to get through them in a way that prioritizes and centers the how.
How do we do this if we're not extroverts? How do we do this if we're neurodivergent, introverted? I mean, diversity is exceptionally important. Inclusivity is exceptionally important. But when we're learning to learn, we don't all learn the same way. So, is there a way to approach this strategy while bringing others along with you? I'm just trying to get to a point where I'm just trying to understand how we devise a strategy if it's not the same for everybody else, but can still be effective.
Yeah. So, what you've depicted is my whole life. So, as a once high school classroom teacher, exclusively supporting learners working through addiction with learning disabilities, with mental health issues for 12 years on a post-secondary campus, creating thriving interventions on kind of a national scale, exclusively also for students who were struggling, chronic health, ADHD, injury. That continues, that informs my work every day. And I'm delighted you asked about extroversion, or like how buoyant and out in the world do I need to be. I'm trying with my whole heart to be that in this moment, but I'm no extrovert. I know what that is. I also come from a generation where psychoeducational testing wasn't really the norm. So I can't possibly tell you what my learning profile is. But what I know is it is a welcome for all learners and all ways of learning, which is to say, if we, for example, in a meeting, in an event, the way that we think of every diet and every practice as being welcome in space, so too is every way of learning. And in that, we can actually make suggestions like, if anyone in having to pre-read this material and come prepared, you want to check out the bionic reading method. That's where it bolds the first few letters or syllables of every word to be able to retain that information and move through. That's born out of the wisdom of ADHD research. Or here's a really ethical way of using ChatGPT to synthesize enormous volumes of material that maybe you don't have a chance in heck at being able to actually get through and distill in preparation for a board meeting. There are so many. Here's another one, magic to do. This is brilliant. If you were to grandmother Google magic to do right now, I make no money off of any of the things I say, just to be really clear. This is all crowdsourced, right? I know half of the staff comes from other folks being like, hey, Deena, have you seen this? Hey, Deena, have you seen that? So if we look up magic to do and we go, oh man, how do I write an outline for a project? How do I write a Gantt chart? And then we literally magic wand. It will break it down into chunked subtasks. That is so much more helpful than saying to somebody, do a work back. Project management, don't you? Not helpful. Not helpful. How do we move away from shaming assumptions by giving people tools to how, tools to access? So how do we implement it organizationally, no matter if you have ADHD, if you are introverted, if you have any kind of combination of learning intricacies? You share tools. As a leader, you share the tools you turn to. In any kind of gathering, what are the tools? What are you using? What are you using to show up and support your day and make it more doable? I think there would be such a bi-directional, reciprocal, or there's like the mutuality. And what is it you're doing over there to make work life actually manageable? How are you doing that very big project and not losing your mind? How are you ensuring accountability? Oh, I'm using Asana. Oh, I'm using Slack. Oh, I'm using. Great. Every day there are new tools, most of them free, that if we just through conversation, relationship, invitation, popping them up, having them be as standard as any learning outcome to an event, it would change workflow. It would change relationship to work. It would change ultimately productivity and how people feel about what they do with the minutes and hours of their day.
We talk about executives modeling the cultures they want. So, how do you see the C suite normalizing this kind of culture?
Oh, man, at the beginning of every meeting, the end of every meeting, how are you actually going to do that? I think the humility and the honoring of revealing the infrastructure to how we go about doing stuff, the the tools to do task initiation. Dude, Russell, right now, when you have a task on your to-do list that's meaty or weighty
Mm.
and you don't actually want to do it, but you feel the heavy pressure of you have to do it, how do you start? And I know you're going to be glib and sarcastic, so if we could shortcut through that, you're very funny. But what's the heartfelt thing after that of like, how do you start something you don't really want to do?
In the simplest of forms, I just start. Like it's just I just start. I get to a point at the end of my day. I would love to say it's the first thing I do in the morning, but I'll do all the other things ahead of it because they're either more enjoyable, quicker, I get to talk to somebody I like. Like it's something in that is that I will put all the roadblocks in the way so that by the time it rolls around, I at least start. I don't get very far, but I will nibble. And then as soon as I nibble, I realize it's not nearly as bad as I think it's going to be. And then I attack it a little better the next day. That's generally how it seems to work for me.
There are two learning strategies that you have just mentioned right away. So one is the 15-minute rule. Might not be 15 minutes, might be 8, might be 23. But that's a standard way, a kind of really well known out there. If you start without contemplating, do I feel like it? Am I in the mood? We have a real hard time with forecasting correctly because I think I'm going to be much more in the mood tomorrow. I will not be. I will never feel like doing this really annoying, hard, like complicated task. I actually will never feel like it. So if my starting is based on feeling like it, I really got to find a different strategy. 15-minute rule, your description of nibbling. If I just start and do some nibbles, this thing will eventually get done. The other thing you've mentioned is the Zeigarnik effect, which is when we leave something incomplete, it's much easier to pick it up. We reactivate our memory. We can get back in the flow. We don't have to do it all. We don't have to complete it all. There are hundreds of strategies like this. Chunking, we take a big thing, we make it into smaller tasks. It goes on and on and on. If only we talked about it outside of classroom spaces or, metacognition conferences.
How do we keep this consistent, Deena? Because I can tell you people will listen to this and are like, oh, great, I'll start my meeting like X now. Or we're going to have a meeting tomorrow where we're going to talk about this. And then it dies on a vine. Or dare I say it, we get too busy. So, how do we get consistent when it comes to learning to learn?
I was thinking about this because wouldn't it be so nice if I had like an acronym for everybody? Wouldn't that be like if I gave everyone a mnemonic? Boom, there's a learning strategy, mic drop there. Anyone get it? It's a bit of a, yeah, mnemonic memory.
Sorry, I have
Memory. Yeah.
something glib to say, but I'm
I
going to
know,
keep it to
bit of
myself.
a learning nerd. Sorry. So I tried to come up with some maybe helpful alliteration. The first response I'll say to you is this. Um, there is nothing prescriptive that any listener has to do at all. Okay. And there's nothing that the bunch of your listeners have to do in the same way. There is no set way to do this. It's simply a principle, an awakening to revealing the how, to be willing to go, I'm not going to assume you know what I'm talking about. And I don't want you to assume that I understand how to do this. So I don't know, a helpful acronym. How can I make this clearer? Right? Clearer. Like that pedagogy of meetings. Am I using acronyms that are leaving people out? Am I assuming access points that people don't have? Am I referring to institutional history that no one has a hope and heck who's a hire from the last 2 years? Is any knowledge about? What am I assuming that if I catch myself, oh, let me explain that actually. Let me give you the full information. So can you make it clearer? How to make it kinder? What's the tone I'm using that's full of assumption or not? And what's the time I'm expecting? Am I trying to get it all in? Can I offer a little bit more spaciousness for us to co-wrestle through? Are you understanding in a solid way when you leave this meeting, when you leave this session, when you leave whatever it is, this encounter? Do you know what your next or your first step is? And then last is congruous. So how am I helping people do their work in ways that are congruous with the policies, the languaging I'm using? Is it in sync with mission, vision, values? Am I sharing how to do that instead of just getting really pissed off when there's misalignment? What do you think? Clearer, kinder, congruous?
K-k-k.
Kind of?
Doesn't really roll off the tongue, but, makes a lot of sense. Just
I
not a
don't know. I have some poetic sensibility. I was
imp.
trying. I just want to say the word how. Maybe I got to,
Oh, that's a
maybe,
good
all
one.
right. So maybe book number 3 is going to be something to do with HOW. Do you know book number 2 is going to be raising well learners and teaching learning strategies to parents?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that's coming out next September.
Oh, fantastic. Way to workshop my show.
Thanks, everyone. What does everyone think? All right, how? Right. We're going to scrap clearer, kinder, and congruous. We're bringing in something meaningful with the letters HOW.
You heard it here. All right. So, how have you seen this work? How have you seen a culture embracing learning to learn and it benefiting from it?
Ooh. I mean, that's where when you see chief learning officers. P.S. If anyone is recruiting out there, um, I see it when I'm asked to come and give talks on literally prioritization. I see it when organizations welcome open conversations around wrestling with time management. I see it happening when there is honesty around how hard it is to do the work shit of the day. That's where I see it happening. I think some institutions get it a little bit more than others. You can imagine anything to do with formal education, pretty well practiced. I see offshoots, nonprofits. I see some spaces that borrow. I see places that are actually trying to do the work of decolonization, equity, diversity, and inclusion, justice, because they're using language of unlearning, of deep, radical, rebellious undoing. That takes a sharing of, wait, how do you do what you're doing? What are the principles underneath your workflow, your approach to time, your relationship with time?
So you've touched on it a bit throughout our conversation, but I want to just clear it up, get to a point here where we can be very succinct. If someone's listening to this and they're like, I need to learn how to learn, I need to take that first step forward, what would you recommend they do when they go back to the office tomorrow and they're thinking about changing the way they approach learning?
Yeah. I would begin to demystify that a little bit. You could even bring a learning strategy to unpacking that. You could put, for example, on a piece of paper, if you like actually having a pen in your hand and drawing something out, put the word learning strategy in a bubble. And then have offshoots from there about what that really means. Is it something to do with reading copious amounts of note articles, research? Is that what's getting in your way? And it's very, very difficult to find time and clarity and make meaning of lots and lots of words on lots and lots of pages. Is it something around timing? Are you feeling either late on deadlines, or it's hard for you to meet milestones, or you get the work done on time, but it comes at a huge cost, a lot of stress, panic even? Is it something around editing and clarity of communication? Is it around presentations and being able to speak in front of people? Is it about distilling what's important from when someone else is, whether it's at a meeting, a large gathering? We try to break down what it is about learning that is messy or thorny or tricky or muddy for some. What is holding someone back, getting in the way? And then from there, we can begin to strategize. So if it's about reading, is it about volume? Well, we might take the total number of pages that we need to read in preparation. We divide that by the number of days. So I got 100 pages I got to read. I got 5 days to do it. I'm not going to try to sit down 100 pages all at once. I won't retain anything for like past page 25. So to bring alertness and bring understanding, I'm going to read, 20 pages a day for 5 days. And if 20 pages in one sitting is a lot, I'm going to break that down into 10 pages at the start of the workday and 10 pages at the end. That's a very different way of moving through work, right? If it has to do with editing, what's the feedback I've been given before? Am I aware of some of the basics? Do I read it aloud to myself? Do I print it off, double space, whatever the document I'm working on is? Do I peer swap with somebody else and we can actually co-edit each other's work? Is it around procrastination? And to your really beautiful insight around that 15-minute rule, or leaving something partially done so I can pick it up the next day. The strategies are actually endless. It's beginning to identify what aspect. Is it around the reading type thing, the speaking type thing, the making sense of something, the polish? Each of these will come with both digital and, by hand strategies that you then compare and tailor, experiment with, make your own.
I think that's a beautiful way to move into the last question of our conversation, which is, Deena, what's one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work?
To improve their relationship. Beautiful. Is when I have a request as a colleague, as a supervisor, as a decision maker, as either a thought leader or leader with positional power. If I am asking or directing somebody to do something, may I also reveal the how without any assumption hovering there that will lead to confusion, that will lead to less productivity, less clarity. If I'm going to ask you, I'm also going to share either what I have in mind or space for you to ask, what are some ways you can suggest that I might start or move through it?
That is Dr. Deena Kara Shaffer. She is an author, educator, learning coach, amazing technologist, as we've learned, and speaker. Thank you so much for being here, Deena.
You're welcome. And also, that was so hard. And the learning for me today was the deep patience and self compassion with things wildly outside control. It might be my province to your point, Russell. It might be the, really half a millimeter of rain that has disrupted the whole interweb. It's hard to say. Um, but I've had to learn in this moment that deep stick to itiveness, that deep perseverance of the thing that is at the heart of us, which is the joy of conversation, the joy of talking about how to make work better, especially when it's hard.
And I appreciate having the conversation with you. Thanks so much for this, Deena. That was awesome.
Thank you, Russell, so much.
That's it. That's all. We are done. Another episode of Relationships at Work, the Leadership Mindset Guide to Creating a Workplace We Love. Big thanks to Dr. Deena Kara Shaffer for sharing her thoughts. Such a great conversation we had. I really, really enjoyed her insights and her thoughtfulness digging into these topics. You can tell she's really had a lot of thoughts about it through her career and through her own academic journey. So really stoked that she shared so much with us. If you've enjoyed this episode or any episode of Relationships at Work, I have a favor. Could you tell others? Just one other person. Like I said, could be in a text, could be email, could be in a conversation. However you best feel sharing that information works for who you're recommending it to. The more we get it out to other people's ears, the more the show grows. And I really, really appreciate your time and effort in doing so. Take care.